Have you ever promised to do something to God, or promised Him that you would do something in return for a favor? We're going to talk about Hannah vowing a vow to God and what that looked like, and also how sometimes people may see us doing something and they might judge us wrong. But we'll talk about that and on this episode of Bible Women in Bathrobes. Stay tuned.
Welcome to Bible Women in Bathrobes, the podcast where faith meets comfort. Join us Tuesday and Thursday mornings as the gals from Women Warriors of Light and their guests don bathrobes and dive into the inspiring stories of women in the Bible and the teachings of Jesus Christ. From Esther's bravery to the Sermon on the Mount, we explore it all with warmth, laughter, sisterhood, and maybe even a few sleepy-eyed moments. Tune in live or at your leisure as we learn lessons from Scripture which empower women today.
Hello and welcome to Bible Women in Bathrobes. I'm your host, Tamara Anderson, and I have Bonnie Randall here with me. Hi, Bonnie.
Good morning.
And Jen Brewer. Welcome back, Jen.
Thank you. It's great to be back.
Wonderful. And we are talking again about Hannah. And last week we kind of talked about who Hannah was in the Old Testament and how her husband Elkanah had two wives, Hannah and Peninnah. And Peninnah had children and Hannah was barren. And Hannah was so sad. This became a point of extreme hardship for her. And we kind of dove into how she wept bitterly. And so what Hannah ends up doing, they would come up every year, her family would come up to worship in Shiloh and offer sacrifices to God. And so Hannah, because every year her husband would give her a worthy portion, Peninnah would pick on her. And so she just wept. She wept and wept because she didn't have children. That was the desire of her heart. And that's kind of where we pick up the story of Hannah weeping and her husband saying, I love you so much, Hannah. I love what he asks for in verse 8. He says, why weepest thou? Why eatest thou not? And the only other person to ask that in the scripture of a woman was Jesus. He said, why weepest thou? When Mary was weeping. And so I'm thankful at least Hannah had a husband who seemed to really love her. And then Hannah rose up and she went and prayed at the temple, or right outside the temple there. And we read in verse 10, it says, and she was in bitterness of soul and prayed unto the Lord and wept sore. And this is where it says, and she vowed a vow and said, O Lord of hosts, if thou wilt indeed look on the affliction of thine handmaid and remember me, and not forget thy handmaid, but wilt give unto thine handmaid a man-child, then I will give him unto the Lord all the days of his life, and there shall no razor come upon his head. And so what she's saying here is, if you give me a son, I'm going to give him back to you, and he will be dedicated to the Lord. And I'm just going to pause right there and just ask for any thoughts. Jen, we'll start with you.
So many thoughts on this. If she had gone in continuation to what we talked about last week, if she had gone with the tradition of this is just my lot, this is just what I need to do, I'll just go home, it could have been a whole different story. Mm-hmm. And yet this reminds me of the woman who approaches Jesus and says, let me have a blessing. And I mean, it kind of in our language comes off very rude when he's like, no, it's not for, this is for this people, not that people, kind of not for the dogs. And she comes right back with, well, even the dogs get the crumbs. And after that, after her persistence, Christ says, I have not seen such great faith in all of Israel. Here you go. So again, like, I feel like ancient stories are filled with so much of a paradox, because we kind of get told, oh, don't ask for a sign, don't do this, don't push. And other times we read about people pushing, but wait, I need this. And the persistence. In fact, the story of the unjust judge, Christ gives the meaning of that parable before he even gives the parable. The only time he ever does that, gives the meaning. He says, so that you will weary the Lord with your pleadings, so that you will constantly come and pray to God. And I feel like she's showing this full course. And it's so taboo right now, I feel like, for me, at least, from what I've absorbed with my growing up culture of, you don't bargain with God. You don't, like, those are stories that are given in I tried to bargain with God, as a faux pas. And here she is laying out, this is what I'll do. I want to strike a bargain. I will make a covenant with you. If you give me a child, I will do XYZ. And I love it. I love her persistence. She's a woman who, in the verbiage I talk a lot about, feels a rumble. She knows something needs to change. She can't keep going with the status quo. Like, she's been weeping bitter tears. She can't stay how things are. And so she comes with a plan. In my religious tradition, there's another story of a man who comes to Christ with a plan. Christ tells him to build a boat, and there are some problems with it. And the first two problems, Christ says, oh yeah, do this and this. The third problem, Christ says, what do you want me to do? And he comes with, like, this is her coming with a plan. Mm-hmm. And I say that tongue in cheek often, where I take my plans to God. I'm like, but what about this? Like, it would work really well like this. And 99.999% of the time, God kind of gives me that little pat on the head and, oh, that's so sweet. You little mortal self, like, that's so cute, your plan. But boom, here's my plan. And let's expound the heavens. But I think there are times too when he's like, yeah, let's do it. Let's go for it. Which, as we'll talk later, I'm sure she had some, whoa, wait a minute, are you sure? Because she kind of had a run-in with the priest that she was later going to give her son to, which that I'm sure that was probably on the editing floor, that she had some moments of asking God about that. Like, wasn't there a caveat somewhere? Isn't there a loophole?
Change the priest for me
that we can? but I'm talking too much. I love that she came to God, persisted, and presented a plan. I love that. Such a strong archetype of a woman.
Yeah. Okay, Bonnie.
That's also one of my favorite parts of this story, because I am one who has bargained with God a few times, and I'm not ashamed about it. I'm like my counterparts here in my area, because these were righteous yearnings of my soul, right? These were things that, like, I'd been promised, like, you'll be a mom, right? And I wasn't a mom yet. So here I was going, you said I would be a mom and I'm not a mom. Like, what gives, right? And so pleading the same vow as her and going back. We talked about that last episode. And this episode, this verse, actually, you made me remember a story about a time when I was in the temple bargaining with God. And I remember praying, I said, I know I'm not supposed to bargain with you, but can you just hear me out? Like, here's the situation. And it was all about my brother. He had just gone off to war. 9/11 had just happened, and he had just graduated boot camp in the Marine Corps. And his, long story short, he didn't get to go to Afghanistan right away because some things had happened and he had to stay behind. But then he was supposed to go right into Iraq. So this was right when our troops were invading Iraq. So they were crossing into the border. And I was just beside myself. My brother had kind of gone a little bit wayward. He wasn't like reading scriptures or praying and things like that. And I'm like, who is going to be protecting him? He's not doing the things to get protection. And I was so worried. Judgy's sister over here. And I'm sorry, Rick, if you happen to be listening, I apologize for that. I was worried. I was so worried. And I was so worried that his best friend had died in a car accident and was no longer going to be right beside him, protecting his six, right? Like I was just beside myself. And I was in church crying before a fireside, and some friends came up and they're like, "What's wrong? Why weepest thou?" And good old men always asking, "Why is the woman crying?" And they reminded me of this story about and how the people in that city prayed for these rebellious young men who were going off the rails. And they had an angel come and turn their hearts around. And they said it wasn't the boys who made that happen, it was the people and their dad and their family who prayed for them. Miracles can happen when you pray for people. So I went back to the temple and I said, all right, I'm taking this story to heart. You've said that if I pray for people, miracles can happen. I know I'm not supposed to really bargain with you, but here's my proposal. If I come to the temple every single week, can you transfer the blessings that would come to me to my brother? I don't need them. I'm safe. I'm okay. He needs them. And ladies, I felt the strongest yes. I felt him say, I have heard you. I see you. I see him. Yes, if you will do this, it will all work out. He may not be protected in the way that you think he's going to be protected, but I will watch out for him. And I had so much peace, and other things came to me too, but I just had this overwhelming sense of peace that God heard me and that he saw me and he saw my brother and he knew what was going on. Fast forward a few months, he came home and he was okay. And later we were talking about things and he had these amazing experiences where he felt miracles happen. A few months later, he had to go back to Fallujah. And this was the first battle of Fallujah. And this was, if you know anything about that war, you know that the first battle of Fallujah was a mess. It was a nightmare. We lost so many soldiers during that time. And I was, again, terrified of him going. And because I knew he was walking into the lion's den. And it was a den of lions and vipers and bears and all sorts of horrible, scary things. And him being with the job that he had as a machine gunner, he was one of the very first that they picked off. And so again, I went back to the temple and I was like, okay, hey, can we renew this bargain? Can we do this again? And again, I felt this overwhelming sense of peace, this overwhelming sense of, I hear you, I see him. You keep coming to me with the faith and I will keep doing my thing. And there were a few really sacred things that happened that I knew that there were different times when I would go to the temple and the next day something would happen to protect my brother. And it was crazy. When he came home and we lined up the stories later, because for the first little while he wouldn't talk about it. But later when we started lining up our timelines, we realized things that were happening to me in the temple were then happening to him within a day or two. It was crazy. So my testimony is yeah, we can't control the elements. We can't tell him what we're going to do, but our faith can move mountains. And I've, on the flip side, haven't had experiences where my prayers didn't work out the way I wanted, right? And the miracle wasn't the saving of the person, but the miracle was the lesson learned and the growth and the understanding, right? So we do have to have both sides to learn both lessons.
Mm, yeah. Oh, I love that. And we also read in here that this had been going on for years. So this wasn't like the first time Hannah came up and made this vow. This has been going on for years and years and years. So, maybe her first prayers weren't answered. Maybe her first tries weren't answered. So I like what you said, Jen, about persistence, persisting, banging on those doors of heaven. Eventually, our prayers change to become what we need them to be. Or perhaps God changes our heart or gives us an idea of what we should pray for, kind of like Bonnie's story, and transferring the blessings to her brother. And then we let's keep going. It says, as she was praying, that the priest Eli saw that she was moving her lips. It says in verse 13, now Hannah, she spake in her heart, only her lips moved, but her voice was not heard. So Eli kind of judged her, and he thought, oh, she's drunk. And so he says, how long wilt thou be drunken? Put away wine from thee. And Hannah answered and said, no, my lord, I am a woman of sorrowful spirit. I have drunk neither wine nor strong drink, but have poured out my soul before the Lord. And then she basically says, don't think I'm a daughter of, Belial, which means basically good for nothing, or wickedness. For out of the abundance of my complaint and grief, I have spoken hitherto. So she is explaining, I am pouring my soul out to God here. And then Eli answered and said, go in peace, and the God of Israel grant thee thy petition that thou hast asked of him. And she said, let thy handmaid find grace in thy sight. And she went her way and did eat, and she was no more sad. So here she got judged for a little bit, and she's like, no, 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 no. That's not what I am, that's not who I am. And then she's promised a great promise that God will grant her petition. So she went away joyful. So any thoughts on this, ladies? Bonnie, let's start with you.
So I felt like this story is a great lesson for all of us who have been wounded by a church leader or by a member of our church, right? He judged her wrongly, right? He mistook something. And how many times have we done the same thing to other people or have it done to ourselves? But she, right away, she didn't get mad. She stayed, she corrected him, right? She didn't just stand and take the abuse. She corrected him. And then he apologized, well, sort of apologized by giving her a blessing, right? And I feel like this is such a great example to all of us of forgiveness and reconciliation, and how when we can do those things within our church and without, right? Like we have blessings that come. It makes me think of when I was in college, I had made some major mistakes and it led me down a dark path, and I ended up being date raped. And I went back to my church leader at the time and told him everything that happened. And he did not respond in the way that you would think a church leader would. He didn't respond with compassion and understanding and forgiveness or any of those things. He actually said, what did you think was going to happen? Boys will be boys. Stupidest thing you could possibly say. And I share that story not to like condemn him by any means, but to share that I had to learn forgiveness. And at that time, I was not Hannah. I did not immediately forgive or correct and move on my merry way. Instead, I wandered off the path even further. And it led to several years of wandering and distress and all sorts of horrible things. And you guys have heard the story in past episodes, so I won't go there, but it led to that prodigal journey. And I later had to learn to forgive him. And I'm actually really grateful that he said that stupid comment, because it had led to me now having so much more grace for people, for when they say dumb things without thinking, and me being able to pause and say, they're human, they're allowed to make mistakes, they're allowed to say dumb things, and I'm allowed to forgive. This is an opportunity for me to forgive and to give people the benefit of the doubt. And that has served me really well, because since then I have heard other things that church leaders have said that I didn't agree with and that were hurtful. Another opportunity to forgive and to see the greater picture. Other people, I have been the person that has said dumb things, that has hurt other people, and I've needed to ask for forgiveness. So this story is a great example to me, and I hope to all of us, that people are still human, even if we are in high stations of your church. We can still make mistakes. And just like all children of God, we all deserve forgiveness and a little more compassion and grace.
Jen?
That's beautiful and profound, Bonnie. Thank you so much for sharing that. It brings me to, I get a little hot and bothered when that abruptness happens, or something that's, if I feel misunderstood. And I absolutely adore the Old Testament, because it is nothing but hot messes. It is just all these humans bumbling their way through. I don't know who the editing board was, but thank you for not giving us the whitewashed version. Because what that makes me do after I'm doing my 20th century mocking or 21st century mocking of, they're so dumb. Then I take a step back and I'm like, oh, I'm so dumb. And how beautiful it is that God works with messes and can turn that into masterpieces. That it's not about the person, it's about the message. And the Eli, after having wrongfully accused her, could then step forward as a vessel from God. Wow. So there's hope for me that after I respond not so sing-song Snow Whitey to my children, can then turn around and still receive inspiration of how to raise said children. That he doesn't kick. Eli might not be a good example, because his butt does get kicked to the curb later, but that's a whole other story. But while he is in the office, God will utilize him in that. And man, there have been so many church leaders that I sit and I'm like, whoa, well, that's not how I would have done it. Wow. And I was having a particular judgy moment. See, judgy, here you go. And I had this moment with God of, he's like, yeah, it's not how you would have done it. It's not how I would have done it. But who cares? I just need it done. And it's fascinating to me that so many things that he works through, he'll say, yeah, whatever you think. Go this way, go that way, go by land, go by water. Yeah, whatever. Just, it's fine. However, whatever you want to see work. Like with my kids. It's not exactly how I would do that math problem, but you go ahead. You try out that Common Core. we'll see how that works, which spoiler alert, does not end well for anybody, but that's a whole other story. But he lets us function in this mess. And I think part of it is to help each of us, if we're in this training, it's to help us realize, oh, God can pretty much work with anybody. And he can still give me a message through somebody who had just berated me.
Mm-hmm.
Huh. Wow.
Talk about humbling. Like, she really had to humble herself and accept that. I mean, she did get the words that she wanted, she'd been longing to hear, but just surprisingly that it came from somebody who was just really rude. And I love that you said that he can still use them and use us, right? When we do something wrong, it doesn't take away the mantle or stewardship, right? Like, you still have stewardship over your kids, so you can still receive revelation for them, even if you just weren't, like you said, sing songy Snow White. That's so true.
I mean, forgiveness is real and
Mm-hmm.
it's complete. And what better way to show that than God still using vessels, even when we're dorks about it.
It's amazing how God can use all of us flawed people to bring about his purposes. It really is. And I'm thankful he does, that he believes in each of us enough to keep trusting us, and we keep trying. I think that's one of the greatest examples we can actually share with our children is that, hey, mom's isn't perfect either. And I make mistakes all the time. And I keep trying, because that's really what we want to teach the rising generation is we're all flawed, but God still loves us anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And these are really, really good points. Awesome. Well, let's wrap it up here, guys. Final thoughts, takeaways that you like from these verses that we've read here. Jen, let's start with you.
Okay, I have two final thoughts. I'll
Yeah.
try to be really brief. One is I love in verse 18, like we're talking, this has been years of petitioning and petitioning and petitioning, and then just get accused of being a drunk and then still saying, no, I want this. And then the priest says, okay, God's going to grant it. Like, she wasn't pregnant. She didn't have a baby. And yet she went away and ate and was happy. And that to me is, I just learned this a few weeks ago from reading a book, is the difference of faith and hope. Like, she had come with faith all these years. God, I know you can do it. I know you can do it. I know you can do it. Hope is, I know it can happen for me. Mm-hmm. Like, I know God can do it, but can he do it for me? And do I believe that he will do it for me? Like, I feel like that's where verse 18 is where she transitioned from faith to hope. Of, oh, wow, this can really happen. And then zoom out the broader version of Hannah and why she feels this need to push and push and push and not just be happy with the portion her husband gives her, is I feel like speaks to, okay, I have like this massive thing in my brain. I'm going to condense it to like 20 seconds. I might leave some points out, but women are the crux of the world. And from the beginning of time have been the crux of the world, not just gosh, we need you. Gosh, your voice is important. If you look at women through history, women have opened every epic of time with Christ. Okay. You've got Eve, opened motherhood. The world talks about Adam being the person who ushered in. He was content to sit in the garden. Like, it was Eve that pretty much shoved him out. It's like, let's get moving. Let's bring humanity into being. Yeah. And her name has been slaughtered through history because of that decision that she made to bring humanity about. You've got Mary, who, as a teenager, an angel comes down and says, yo, you're going to have a baby. You're engaged. Sorry, have fun explaining that one. I mean, facing these unbelievable oppositions and brought in, like she brought in Christ. Then you've got Mary Magdalene, who goes to the tomb. She's the first one who ushers in Christ. Her testimony was muck as a woman. Nobody would believe anything a woman said. And yet Christ appeared to her first. Like this female thing. Females have been at the crux of every turn point. You've got Hannah, who she, with this, brought in Samuel, who ushered in this entire epic of the prophets. You know, we had the epic of the judges before. This marks a transition into the age of the prophets. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And Hannah brought that about. And she brought that about because she wouldn't take no for an answer, because she knew there was something that she needed to do. And we talk about that as motherhood, but we don't talk about the story surrounding that. That it's these mothers who went through bashing, went through unbelievable odds, and kept persisting through really weird and wonky circumstances and have ushered in these epics. So when we bring that to us, now I'm going to, lightning might strike. But I truly believe that we are at an age where women need to stand up and claim our power. And it's not a either or, women or men. It's a congruence that we have this great power of patriarchy, which I love, but we're missing the matriarchy. And I feel like that's the piece that needs to be put into place in order to usher in the coming of Christ. Now, I haven't read that anywhere, so again, if lightning strikes, you'll know I was wrong. But if we look at history, it's like this missing piece of this wholeness that women, and I see it everywhere. I talk to so many women who feel this, there's something. I don't know what it is. I get told to sit down and shut up, but I need to stand up and talk. I don't know why. I don't know what. So my ending is a call out to women, warriors of light. Like, this is your battle cry. Come join the ranks. Like, you are needed. You are a warrior, and you are so needed to bring in the return of Christ.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. Bonnie, takeaways.
I just want to give a standing ovation to that speech, because it was beautiful and spot on. And preach it, girl. You stand up on that mountain and you just keep saying that, because it's needed. And us women really do need to realize that we are powerful. They have a job to do and we have a job to do, and we can work together to make that happen. My takeaway is, going back to the story of my brother, to wrap that up, I realized, right, like, I wasn't better than my brother because I was in the temple praying. My brother was doing his mission. He was doing exactly what he was supposed to do. And thank goodness he was over there fighting. Thank goodness he was brave enough to do what he was supposed to do. And thank goodness I was over here doing what I was supposed to do. We were working together in tandem, doing both of our unique missions, right? I wasn't better than him, and vice versa, right? And learning over time to let go of this judging story and putting myself above anybody else, realizing that we all are on our own unique path and our own unique missions. And like, to echo what Jen's saying, ladies, it is time to stand up, to proclaim the truth that you know, to use your faith, to use the power within you to move mountains and to usher in the second coming, to bring people to Christ, to make powerful things happen. You have a stewardship over certain things. And the sooner you figure out what that is, by praying and asking and pleading, if you're getting that inkling in your feeling that Jen's talking about, I feel like there's more. I feel like there's something that I'm missing. It's because you are. You are being called to something. And I promise you, and I bear you this witness, that if you will take it to the Lord like Hannah did, and you will persistently ask, right? The way will be made shown, and you will figure out your next steps. And he's probably only going to give you little pieces at a time. And don't be surprised if the answer comes from somebody you don't like, or that was mean to you, or comes from a surprising source. It might very well happen that way because God's funny and he loves irony. I love you, and I know you can do this. And I leave you with my prayer today that God will strengthen you.
Thank you, Bonnie.
Yeah.
Gosh, I don't know if I can add much to what you guys have already said. I am just amazed at Hannah's persistence and dedication. She was a woman of incredible faith, and I admire her tremendously for her faith and courage and being able to trust God even when something hard, she was going through something terribly hard. So many times we turn to other places, and she just kept turning to God. And I think that that's a huge thing that we can learn from her. Anyway, ladies, thanks for joining us today, and we'll pick up next week where we left off and learn more of the story of Hannah. Have a blessed day.
Thanks for tuning in to Bible, Women, and Bathrobes, hosted by Women Warriors of Light. We've loved exploring the stories of remarkable women or the teachings of the Savior today with you. If today's episode brought someone special to mind, be sure to spread the word. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss a moment of inspiration and sisterhood. Just a friendly reminder, all opinions we share are entirely personal, as we are trying to decipher and apply Bible teachings just like you are. Until next time, stay faithful, and may your journey be blessed and illuminated by God's love.